Right then, this is a quick video for a very, very rare car indeed, which I'm absolutely delighted to add to my collection of older classic Hondas. A little bit of kind of the holy grail of Honda Prelude ownership. This is a Prelude 2.2 Motegi 200. It's a 2000 W registered car. The more exciting bit comes when it's actually had just the one private owner from new, who has had the car serviced each and every year by the Honda main dealers, and the car's covered an unbelievable 32,568 miles. So I was very, very lucky indeed to discover and purchase the vehicle. The reason I want to do the video today is slightly self-indulgent, really. As much as anything else, to just say what I feel about the car, but also to sort of feedback what the car feels like after all these years. First things first, it's it just starts instantly. It just sounds like all Honda 4-cylinder engines of that time. It's got a lovely kind of sweet thrum, counterbalanced engines. It's just beautifully engineered. The moment you start them, you know that they're special, even with this age and era of vehicle, because the engines were light years ahead of its competition. They can feel, very agricultural compared to these things. This feels like a new car in essence to drive, in terms of kind of the mechanical integrity of the vehicle, but also how modern everything still feels on the car, or by and large at least anyway. But the engines, the start of it, I'm not going to push too hard early on. The engine's not warm yet, and it's a particularly cold, chilly day, and there's black ice on the road, so I've got to be very careful indeed. But it's a wonderfully tractable unit. I mean, obviously everyone talks about the VTEC, rightly so, with the when it kicks in, the click, the howl, and all the way around to the red line. But not forgetting that most of the time you're not driving like that. You're actually driving as I am now, just sort of relatively sedately. And it's just such a flexible unit. It's so mild-mannered. You could be driving any 2-litre car at this, or 2.2-litre car at this time. Aside from the fact you put your foot down, you've got good initial throttle response. It's not going to pin you back at those sorts of revs, of course it's not. But it doesn't fluff or fluster in any way. And it sounds, even at low revs, whilst it's quiet and smooth, there's a sense of urgency to the engine, which something's coming on it. But the more you dig into it, that's up to 4.5. Suddenly the induction starts to make itself more noticeable. It's an astonishing engine for any generation of car, and it shames so many of the modern engines in the world, and some of Honda's. I have to say that this has a thrill, a personality, an oral kind of involvement that people love about Honda, absolutely love about them. Superb engine, absolutely superb. Its deficiencies are obvious, by comparison to modern engines. It's thirsty, relatively speaking. It wasn't for its time, and you can only judge it by its time. It was actually relatively fuel efficient at its time, but by modern standards, no. But by any other measurement, it's still an incredibly able engine, and one that would go into any modern car in terms of kind of noise, vibration, harshness, that kind of measurement. Going through sort of clutch is typical Honda. It's slick, it's smooth, it's precise, it's really nicely done, and again, better than some modern ones where they can be kind of vague on engagement. This, you put your foot down, it's got a lovely weighting. It feels just, I don't know, you extend your leg with this sort of juicy pedal that goes down just so wonderfully smoothly. And then you go into the 5-speed, and obviously it is a 5-speed box in this era car, which I believe was a cable-operated vehicle, gearbox at the time. Reminds me very much of the Cords of the era, slightly rubbery in terms of its actuation, very precise, really accurate. When you compare it to something like a DC2 Integra or a Type R Civic, it's slightly slower in its actuation, slightly rubberier in its kind of feel, but still brilliant, absolutely fantastic. It doesn't have that kind of click action that they have built into them, but again, a different car. This isn't a Type R version of the car. It is a brilliant gearbox in every single sense, and again, by modern standards, I have to say, it's as good as anything in the marketplace today, if not better than virtually all of them. It is a wonderful gear change. One thing I always said about Preludes at the time, I always thought the brakes, it was slightly under-braked, and they're very efficient. They pull you up well, but they're not as strong as something like an Integra or a modern Type R Civic. They were good for their time, but they don't have that massive ability to haul, and they would fade after sort of 2 or 3 very strong applications of the brake pedal. I'd normally turn left here, but I'm going to carry on. I'm just loving this car. So then the chassis. This is what it's all about on these cars, and immediately, because I've just sold my DC2, so I've got a direct comparison. I drove it very recently, so normally I wouldn't. It's in storage, so I wouldn't have the opportunity, but now it's kind of fresh in the memory. And again, it was built at the same time as this. So, they were of the same era, but completely different design criteria in terms of what they were trying to achieve. The DC2s were all about, this kind of thick rim steering wheel pinned into the seats, and it was kind of a hefty feel, but a brilliantly precise chassis, and I still maintain the best front wheel drive chassis ever manufactured. This is completely different, but so capable. What it gives you, it's a more compliant ride. Obviously, it's more comfortable than the DC2. It's not as hardcore as them. Notwithstanding, this one needs drop links doing, because I can hear them chattering slightly on the front, so I'll get those attended to. But it's got one really beautifully damped ride. It's settled, whilst being firm. It's what they did very well at the time. This was a time when we didn't have mega low profile tyres, which just murder the ride. It's got a relatively stiff shell for its era, and that's what it relies on to give you the base for the suspension. But it allows for really taut, very flat handling. Only in absolute extremes, when you're really leaning on the car, does it kind of lean over. At those moments, the feedback you get from it isn't as crystal clear as something like a DC2, and I keep comparing it to that, but that's not really fair on the car. But by comparison to other cars of the era, it was giving you information in a different league, but in a completely different way. It's amazing to think that a company that was giving you something like the Integra would then give you this, which was a just completely different view. Sorry, I was just checking someone's going. View on how to sort of make a car feel and a chassis feel, because this starts with kind of a thin-rimmed, leather-bound steering wheel, and it immediately almost is telling you to just fingertips, drive with your fingertips, and that's how the car feels. With the four-wheel steering, especially at speed, you get the four wheels punching in slightly the same direction for that first moment, and so you get this wonderfully smooth initial movement of the car. And when you push at speed, you drive these on the fingertips, you feel them, you delicately push them into the corners, and you let the understeer build, you let the body motion start with the vehicle. You don't hustle it in, you don't drive with your forearms, rigidly holding the thing in, waiting for it to start moving around like you do with the Integra. This is much more delicate. It's just exquisite in the detailing of the chassis and the way that they've designed to set the car up. I'm just going to swing around in here, hope they don't mind. Oops, daisy. It is, as I said, it's just such a different way of doing it. And what's interesting is that I'm driving a car that was built in, was it 1980, whatever it was at the time. No, it's not as much as old as that. What am I looking at? Someone help me out. 1990, I think. It's 21 years old. The car is 21 years old, and I have to pinch myself to think what separates this from a modern car, from a modern sports car. Most of what separates it is what I love about the car. It's the fact that it has a suppleness to it, a usability to it, which so many modern, very overtly sporting cars don't have. They are very wearisome. This is engineered beautifully through every single application of a button, of the steering, of the clutch, of the brakes. It's where even Honda have started to shortcut slightly on certain things. They have, but this has built into it such a depth of engineering knowledge at the time, and they've used it all in this car. You just feel it. But does a modern car brake more efficiently? Yeah, it does. They have bigger tyres, they have bigger brakes, but you don't notice it driving the car as I am now. And the modulation, the brakes, absolutely perfect. They say the way they apply, the way the car stops with the ABS, it's fantastic. By modern standards. The ride, as I said, is actually better than most cars. And this is a horrible piece of road down here. And a lot of modern cars, including Hondas, really struggle on this section of road because it's really pitted, and they sort of bang into them. Like that bump there is horrible, resonates through. But with this one, you feel them, they're there. They jar, but not to the same extent. So it's as able. The handling, I have to say, it's better for being on smaller tyres. It's better for having less grip, because it means you don't have to drive like an absolute hooligan to enjoy the chassis. So a modern car would be quicker around a racetrack if you were driving like a nutcase down the road. But would you enjoy it more? No, absolutely not. And the whole point of buying a car that you want to enjoy driving is to enjoy it. And a lot of modern cars, you can't enjoy them because they're so able, they're so fast, they're so grippy. You don't get anywhere near their limits. You don't know what their limits are, what they're like on their limits. It's only the people from the motoring magazines that will tell you, because they've driven them around Anglesey race circuit, or they've, shouldn't be, but they've driven on the open road like nutcases, where you're not allowed to do that. I had a lovely time with a Civic Turbo, new Type R, but I literally scratched the surface of the damn thing. Nowhere near performance, the limits of its performance. But it was whoosh, it was fast, it was great, it was thrilling. But this gives me more of the time, I have to say. Coming to the interior of the car, this is so much of its era, and it is like a time capsule car, because it's like a brand new in here. You've got this lovely low window line in front, which Honda did at the time. It was very much of the Prelude style. It continues the theme of their design. So you get this unbelievable view out of the car. It is amazing by comparison to modern cars. I sat in a 10th generation Civic recently. It's pillar box by comparison to this. You couldn't really see much of the bonnet, whereas this one, you've got this bonnet going on forever. It's there is a sense of occasion sitting in this car. But the most striking thing of all about this car to me in terms of the inside is the wonderful and just breath of fresh air about the simplicity of the interior. I've been driving the 10th generation Civic. I'm also currently driving a Lexus CT200, both wonderful cars in their own way. But you get in them and you're fanning around, pressing buttons or going into different screens. Well, do you know what? I haven't got half the information. I haven't got Bluetooth hands-free. I haven't got sat-nav. I haven't got God knows what in this car. Auto lights, auto wipers, auto dipping this. This has got a really good air conditioning system. It's got a nice little radio that works perfectly well. It's got heated seats, which are currently on because it's a horrible, cold, nasty day. I've got a dashboard here which is like a bigger version of a Honda motorbike. Massive dials. Simple, easy. You get a rev counter, you get a speedo, you get a temperature gauge, and you get a fuel gauge. That's it. And a couple of warning lights in the middle there. Nothing more. So when I look at the dashboard, that's what I see. When I look at the dashboard of the Civic currently, I'm like, what am I looking at? You know, where's the information is. It takes a senile old sod like me about 5 minutes to work out what speed I'm going at, because you know there's other information there which my eyes are drawn to. You got, you know, different shapes for different things for, you know, readouts. You know, this is how readouts should be, and God only knows they need to get back to things like this, because it makes it so much easier to concentrate on all you want to do, which is driving. But modern cars aren't about driving in the same way. They're all about infotainment, that awful word, that god-awful word I keep hearing, where people are bleating on about, oh, my phone doesn't connect, that doesn't have Apple Play, it doesn't have this, I can't read my damn messages on the move. I mean, my God, you know, I can't connect my phone to this car. I can't answer my phone in this car. I can't read my messages in this car. Thank God I can't, because I'm not distracted by the thing. B, it means I can actually just enjoy driving rather than worrying about who's sending me messages, who's sent me an email, or God knows what else. That's also what's better about this car of this era, not just the Prelude, I have to say. And I'm, you know, getting on my sort of pedestal here, or preaching about, but the reality is it is true. There's so much stuff in modern cars that actually distract. You know, safety devices that distract, in my opinion. You've got these little blinkers on the you know, they're very clever, but for someone of my generation, I see something blink, I want to look at it, and I take my eyes off the road, and it makes me jump. You know, quite often I press the button to deactivate the damn thing because it's so annoying. But getting back into this car after, I mean, I sold these things at Honda. I mean, I had one or two actually as personal demonstrators for my use. And so to get back into one now, after probably best part of 20 years, last time I had one of sort of this age or mileage, is, well, it's a thrill, I have to say. I feel genuinely, I don't know what the word would be, sort of amazed or sort of honoured almost to have ownership of this vehicle, because it is a very, very special car. You could jump in, I mean, its competitors of the time, there's not that many, there's not many cars which are doing what Honda were doing with this car. I can't really think of many off the top of my head, but the closest would be, I hated them as well, the Vauxhall Calibra. You know, the 2.5 V6 was a nice engine, but they had lots of trouble with them. Basically, it was a Cavalier in drag, which meant it was an awful understeery chassis. I mean, it's just, we had them. We had a couple. You know, and yeah, they were very fast. They were very slippery, and they went like stink. But they didn't like going around corners. I know that. They had horrible brakes in them. I remember nearly killing myself in one of the damn things. Fiat coupes of the time, maybe. There's going to be others, you know, but probably the best car, or its closest competitor, would be sort of a VW Sirocco, that kind of thing, which were lovely, really lovely car, the closest to this in terms of, you know, what you're trying to get in terms of quality of engineering. But what none of them have is the beauty of engineering detailing that the Prelude had. And it was to Honda's shame they ended it, and I hope to God they bring one back that does the name justice, and they don't just use the name for marketing, because they need to bring something back with the silhouette, not just styling cues. Give it the silhouette, make it known to be a Prelude. And a Prelude was, by definition, and I had the Mark 1. I've had all of them, but the Mark 1 was the very first Honda I ever owned. And there's obviously this is what should come next. This is the car that told you it was the future was here on the road kind of thing. It was a prelude to what's to come. That's all by definition. And I hope they do the same again. I really, really do. And Honda is still eminently capable of doing that. They're still a wonderful engineering company. Obviously it won't be petrol engine, it'll probably be electric, but they can still do wonders with it. So as I apologise, it's been completely self-indulgent. I've gone off a complete tangent, so I haven't done it off a sort of a cheat list or script or anything, as you can probably tell.